Romans chapter 3 highlights three main questions. 1. Does being a Jew even have any benefits? 2. If our sin and depravity only highlights God's goodness and purity, then shouldn't we continue to sin? And 3. Does the emphasis of faith cancel out the law? We began reading the book of Romans about 2 weeks ago, and by chapter 3, we can see that there is a pattern of emphasis in Paul's letter to the Romans. His emphasis has been on the universality of the gospel, the depravity of man, and God's overall righteous and faithful nature. In today's Bible study, we're going to be using the three questions as the three sections. Now, the first question, does being a Jew even have any benefits, honestly does not come as a surprise to me. Since we began reading the book of Romans, we've seen Paul tell the Jews time and time again that they should drop their pride because they are not better than the Gentiles. Now, although everything Paul has told them is true, it must have been a bit confusing to the people that have been told their whole entire lives that they are special and set apart for God. But Paul clears out this confusion in the first part of this chapter by telling them that even though being a Jew does not make you better than any of God's children, it is still of benefit because you are entrusted with the whole revelation of God before everyone else. And even though they were continuously unfaithful to God, God remained faithful to them. The second question, if our sin and depravity only highlights God's goodness and purity, then shouldn't we continue to sin, was quite shocking to me. Paul used this hypothetical to guess how people would find loopholes into justifying a sinful life by making it seem like it highlights God's goodness. Now, the funniest part about this claim is that it's actually true. Our sin and depravity actually does highlight God's goodness. But thinking that our sinful nature is of benefit to God because it highlights His goodness is only evidence of our depraved nature. Paul puts it very simply, those who say such things deserve to be condemned. God's love and salvation is not to be taken for granted by trying to find loopholes for us to continue to live our sinful lives. It's simply so that we can allow Him change, transform, and mold us into the people He originally created us to be. Now, before we go to the last question, verses 9 to 18 are important to highlight. Once again, Paul reminds the Jews that they are not better than anybody. He tells us that everyone in the entire world is guilty before God, and no one can be made right by doing what the law commands. The law simply shows us how sinful we are. Now, the last question, does the emphasis of faith cancel out the law? After Paul says the entire world is guilty and nobody can be made right with God through the law, he goes on to tell us about the gospel, about how the only way we can be made right with God is by placing our faith in Jesus Christ, and this is true to everyone who believes, no matter who we are. Now, this question obviously comes from the fact that the Jews had been strictly obeying the law because they believed that it would put them in right standing with God. Hence the pride they felt whenever coming in contact with someone who wasn't subject to the law. So Paul asks and answers this question because he believes that it will be a hypothetical that would come up later. And his answer is simple. He says, of course not. In fact, only when we have faith do we truly fulfill the law. Now, what does Paul mean by this? If we look at the law, we see that it does in fact highlight humanity's depravity. But at the time that the law was given, humanity was depraved without the Holy Spirit within them to help them. Salvation through faith in Jesus Christ causes the Holy Spirit to come and live within you. And with the Holy Spirit within you, you no longer have to rely on yourself to live the life that God intended us to live. By the help of God, you can now live out the life God intended for you to live through the law, by grace through faith.